So at this point, we are storing the recipe into our data store, but we also need to store it into our search index, okay? So how do we do this? Well, again, we need to import a new library of code, which gives us access to the Google's search API. So from google.appengine.api import search, okay? So that's from google.appengine.api import search. Okay, so the first thing we need to do when we are trying to access the search API, either saving a document to the search API or searching for a document, we need to specify what index we want to use. And the index is basically just as an index in the book, in any book, where we have words mapped to pages, okay? So let's say a word is mapped, so let's say App Engine could be mapped to page 86, okay? So the reason why index is so efficient is because it goes by alphabetical order and more or less knows where the word App Engine should be inside of the index. It should be fairly at the top because it starts with an A. And then once it finds App Engine, it sees, okay, that's on page 86. So it can then go directly to page 86 and find all the content it needs to find. So that's why indexes are really, really efficient. Now we can store multiple indices, and for each one we need to give them a name, okay? So here we can say index is equal to search, which is the library, index, the I is uppercase, and then we pass in a name. So let's say recipes. So even though this index is not created yet, when we put something, when we put a document to the index, App Engine behind the scenes will go ahead and create this index and actually put something in it. So this is so little code and we are able to do so much with this code. So this is also one of the nice things about App Engine. Okay, so now once we have our index, we need to create the document. So let's say doc is equal to search.document. And the first thing we need to do is we need to give it a unique ID. So this is called doc_ID. And here we will pass in the ID of the recipe we just created. So recipe key.id as a string. It's very important that this is a string. Okay, and then we can specify the fields of this document. Okay, so the fields will be a list, and each item in the list will be a search dot, and here we have to specify what kind of field it is. So the first field will be a text field, and the name of this text field will be user ID, so the ID of the user that posted it, and the value will be our user ID. Not as a string, as a variable. User ID we created here by default, and then we have overridden if we have a key of a user. Next thing is we want the boolean whether or not this recipe is parsed. So search.atom field. Atom field is basically a more efficient way of searching through items, because it searches through the entire value. It matches the entire value of this field. So we can't store our ingredients and our directions into this field, because then basically our recipes would not be searchable, because the user would have to put everything and in the exact same order if we were to use an atom field. But in the case of parsed, it's very handy because we can say, okay, this field is called parsed, and the value is going to be either a 1 or a 0, whether if it's a parsed recipe or not. So here's where we can do our inline if statement. So we can say 1 if parsed else 0. Okay, so again, 1, we're going to have a 1 in the value of this parsed atom field if parsed is true. Okay, so if parsed is true, we will have a 1 here, else we will have a 0. Okay, next field, search.text field, name is going to be the title of the recipe, and the value is going to be the title. So hopefully you're seeing a pattern here. We are going to replicate the exact same fields as we have in our data store, okay? And then we have cuisine, which will be a text field as well. So here, cuisine. Okay, next field, difficulty. difficulty. Name will be difficulty. Next field will be prep time. And prep time. Now we need to change the type of the field, so it's no longer a text field. It could be, but I prefer to use a number field. Okay, and the same for cook time. And name is going to be also cook time. Okay, so then let's say ingredients. Now, here's a slight difference. We don't want to store the JSON ingredients because this is a full text search. So it's okay if we don't have this information structured, because all we are looking for is if the user types onions, then we want to match this, and we don't care about the format because the full text search will match it if the term onions is in this recipe. So that's why we don't want to use the JSON. Instead, we're going to use our original ingredients, okay, which come as a string. And the same for directions. Okay, directions. Okay, good. And the last thing we want to index is the image URL or the photo URL. Okay, very important, because this way we will be able to show a photo when we list the search results. Okay. Okay, so that's it. We have our document, and now the way we add our document to the index is using the index variable which we created up here, and call the put method. And inside of the put method, we put the document. Okay, nice and simple. And we are done. We are indexing our recipes already, so this is pretty awesome.